Hello everybody and welcome to the Definitive WWE Iceberg. As many of you know, I am a huge, not only WWE fan, but professional wrestling fan. For the past couple of months, I've been wanting to do an iceberg video, in the style that Wendigoon does. I've been really dying to want to do this, and I finally have something. So in the series, I will be discussing some normal to the most absurd WWE iceberg topics. The iceberg tiers are usually images of an iceberg, captioned to show the tip of the iceberg as the summation of the most knowledgeable things, while the farther you go down, the submerged part of the iceberg is the lesser known, more absurd topics. Today, I will be using the iceberg on r/iceberg charts on Reddit, made by user Invincible Elliot. So all credit on this iceberg goes to Invincible Elliot on the iceberg charts subreddit. This iceberg features 6 layers, with each layer getting more absurd and lesser known. I will be splitting the series into at least 6 parts. It all depends on how big a layer is. I might have to cut one layer into 2 videos, who knows, but essentially a video for each layer. Each term on each layer is color-coded and should help you with getting a broader sense of what I'll be talking about in that situation. So, white is general, green is storyline, yellow is theories and speculation, orange is unfinished storylines, purple is controversies and incidents, blue is backstage info, brown is mysteries, red is specific matches/moments, pink is scrapped plans, aqua is lost media, gray is botches, lime is gimmicks, gold is pay-per-views and shows, and maroon is rumors. So in this video, I'll be discussing tier 1 of this iceberg, and let's go ahead and get into it. Wrestling is fake. As most people know, the sport of professional wrestling is scripted. While most argue that it's not fake, per se, most fans say it's a scripted sport, in which matches and storylines are predetermined, as a spectacle and event for fans to come and be entertained. It's majorly just, non-wrestling fans will use the wrestling is fake term, that stuff is fake, or hold on, that stuff is fake type stuff, to basically insult the watcher. I don't understand what their problem is. Wrestling haters. I keep using the quotations too much, but yeah, the term wrestling is fake, I think, is regardedly known across 90% of the population who know of professional wrestling. The Monday Night Wars. The Monday Night Wars was a head-to-head war between WWF's Monday Night Raw and WCW's Monday Nitro between September 4th, 1995 and March 26th, 2001. When the WWF bought WCW and its tape library, what led to the growth for WCW Monday Nitro was the large group known as the NWO, led by Hulk Hogan, Scott Hall, and Kevin Nash. They led the war over the WWF for 84 consecutive weeks in the ratings. What led to their growth would also lead to their demise, the overpopulation of the NWO killing the ratings, and with the Attitude Era in full swing in the WWF, it helped with their growth and its eventual gain over the WCW and TV numbers growth. The Pipe Bomb. Pipe Bomb promo is essentially, most of the time, what people call in the business a worked shoot, in which a character essentially pretends to break kayfabe, essentially breaking the fourth wall, and talk about forbidden topics to therefore push a promo or rivalry to a further extent, to give it a more reality feeling, a more, make it feel more real than the scripted soap opera feeling, such as mentioning your opposing wrestlers' real names, mentioning other companies / other company wrestlers, mentioning the scripted fame of the business, and etc. A famous example of the pipe bomb, CM Punk's pipe bomb promo on June 27th, 2011 on Monday Night Raw, where CM Punk was WWE Champion and was having a very well-known real-life conflict with the company over his contract. Fans knew about this and also knew about Punk's reputation as a straight shooter type promo guy. So to capitalize on this, WWE let CM Punk do what seemed like an unscripted monologue at the end of that Monday Night Raw. To make it seem more real, Punk mentioned multiple banned terms that other wrestlers are not allowed to mention, such as mentioning non-WWE talent, then insulting WWE Chairman Vince McMahon, using other wrestlers' real names, and insulting backstage staff. They even cut Punk's microphone toward the end of the promo to give the impression that the WWE were trying to silence Punk. The entirety of the promo was all show, but seemed so real at the time that it was regarded as one of the best promos in professional wrestling history. I strongly suggest you look it up and give it a listen if you haven't heard it at all. The Montreal Screwjob. The Montreal Screwjob was a very infamous kayfabe-breaking moment in professional wrestling history. It occurred on November 9th, 1997 at the Survivor Series pay-per-view in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. At the time, then WWF champion Bret Hart was on his way out of the company. Bret had stated that he was willing to drop the title at any time other than the show Survivor Series in his home country or to Bret Hart. A week before Survivor Series, Hart had signed a contract with rival company WCW beginning that next month. McMahon tried to get the title off of Bret Hart before he left for WCW, but Hart refused to drop the title to Michaels, with whom he had a long off and on-screen rivalry with. Before the match, McMahon, Michaels, and Hart would agree to a disqualification finish with a result in Hart retaining the title, where Hart would lose or vacate the championship at a later date. However, Vince McMahon decided, without Hart's knowledge, that Shawn would win the WWF Championship at Survivor Series that night. Accounts differ as to who was involved in the Montreal Screwjob plan, but it was executed when referee Earl Hebner, on orders from Vince McMahon, who just made his way out to ringside, to ring the bell and end the match by submission, even though Hart had not submitted to the sharpshooter submission hold, which was Bret Hart's finishing move that Shawn Michaels was putting on to Bret Hart. In a very humiliating way, Michaels was then declared the winner by submission and crowned as the new WWF champion. After the match, Michaels' music played and Hebner had exited the ring and was on his way out of the arena. After an initial moment of shock, Bret Hart would get up to his feet and spat in the face of McMahon. Bret Hart then threw a tantrum at ringside, destroying equipment, and then Bret's family would come out to ringside and talk, which got Bret to calm down. Hart would then famously finger trace the WCW logo and then would say "I love you" to the fans in the arena before returning backstage. The Benoit tragedy. This one was this one and another one were some of the really hard ones to write the script for without getting very emotional, learning more stuff about each thing that had happened in that situation. So the Benoit tragedy was a double murder suicide committed by WWE's roster member Chris Benoit over a 3-day period from June 22nd through the 24th of 2007. Benoit murdered his wife Nancy and their 7-year-old son Daniel before hanging himself in his private gym. Autopsy reports show that Benoit's wife was murdered first, as she was tied up at the wrists and feet and died of asphyxiation on June 22nd. Their son Daniel also died of asphyxia. He was killed as he was lying sedated in his bed the next morning after the murder of Nancy on the 23rd. Then the evening of the very next day, with his wife and son's bodies having been dead for 24 to 48 hours, sitting in their house. Chris Benoit would commit suicide in his weight room. He placed Bibles near the bodies of his son and his wife. And since Benoit's suicide, there have been multiple explanations for his actions, none definitive, including severe CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, steroid and alcohol abuse, marital problems, and mental health issues. This incident would lead to a federal investigation into steroid abuse in professional wrestling and would also alter the history in the future of how the business is ran, and it's still influenced that way today with WWE's drug testing policy. The Curtain Call. In May of 1996, a backstage group named The Clique, with members of Paul Triple H Levesque, Shawn Michaels, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, and Charlotte Waltman, existent, I guess. The Clique broke character at a house show at Madison Square Garden in an unscripted incident referred to as the Curtain Call in April of 1996. Nash and Hall had signed contracts with WCW, and this was their last contracted match for the WWF. At the time, Triple H and Kevin Nash were regarded as villains, otherwise known as heels, where Michaels and Hall were fan favorites, otherwise known as a face. The members of the Clique, excluding Waltman, who was in drug rehab at the time and therefore did not participate in the Curtain Call, would stand in the ring and raise their hands after their matches were over. Their actions scandalized WWF management for breaking kayfabe. At the time, they could not punish Hall or Nash because they were both out of their way of the company. They couldn't punish Michaels, who was the then top babyface and WWF champion, so they punished Hunter Hearst Helmsley by taking away his future King of the Ring tournament win and giving it to Stone Cold Steve Austin. So if you think about it, without the Curtain Call, the rise of Stone Cold Steve Austin would be very different. We most likely would have not gotten Austin 316. The death of Owen Hart. On May 23rd, 1999, at the WWF pay-per-view Over the Edge in St. Louis, Missouri, WWF wrestler Owen Hart, in character as the Blue Blazer, would fall 78 feet while being lowered into the ring from the rafters. He landed chest first onto the top rope, throwing him into the ring. Hart had performed this stunt only a few times before. Owen Hart's widow, Martha Hart, stated that by moving around to get comfortable in the harness and his cape on, Hart unintentionally triggered an early release and he would fall to his death. Television viewers did not see this incident. During the fall, a pre-tape promo package was being showed on the broadcast as well as the monitors and Titantron in the darkened arena. After the fall, Hart was being worked on by medical personnel inside of the ring. The event's broadcast was showing only the audience. Meanwhile, WWF head commentator Jim Ross repeatedly told the viewers watching live on pay-per-view what just happened was not a wrestling angle or storyline, and that Hart was hurt badly. Hart was then transported to the Truman Medical Center in Kansas City. While several attempts to revive Hart were made, they were unsuccessful, and Hart succumbed to his injuries and would pass away. It was later revealed that the internal bleeding from the blunt force trauma was the cause of his death from the fall. The trauma severed his aorta, resulting in Hart bleeding internally just minutes later. Owen Hart was just 34 years old. Major controversy arose due to the fact that WWF management chose to continue the event after the tragedy, even after Jim Ross announced the death to the fans watching live on the pay-per-view broadcast. Also, the crowd in the arena was not aware of the passing of Owen Hart and just kinda, what's the word called? Assumed that it was a part of a storyline because they had no clue that this was a tragedy and an accident and all that. While the event went on, it was never commercially released by the WWF home video. In 2014, the WWE Network would air the event for the very first time since its original pay-per-view broadcast. A small tribute is shown before the start, informing fans that Hart died during the original broadcast. All the footage from the incident has been edited out. The event. The XFL. The XFL was a professional American football league created by the WWF and NBC that lasted originally only one season in 2001. The XFL was a football league that would play immediately after the National Football League season had ended to take advantage of the public's desire to watch football after the NFL and college football seasons had both ended. It was promoted as having lesser rules and more extreme to encourage rougher play than any other league. Its telecast featured sports entertainment elements inspired by the professional wrestling company WWF. It also featured heat and kayfabe and suggestively dressed cheerleaders. Even WWF commentary crews joined in on the league to commentate, such as Jim Ross, Jesse Ventura, and Jerry the King Lawler. Despite the influence of sports entertainment, the games were legit and not scripted. The league featured two divisions, with the Eastern Division featuring the Birmingham Thunderbolts, the Chicago Enforcers, the New York, New Jersey Hitmen, and the Orlando Rage. The Western Division featured the Las Vegas Outlaws, the Los Angeles Extreme, the Memphis Maniacs, and the San Francisco Demons. The 2001 version of the league only lasted one season, with the Los Angeles Extreme defeating San Francisco Demons 38-6 to win the $1 million game, which was their championship game. They would then fold after one season and go bankrupt. With a planned comeback in 2022 that was halted due to the COVID-19 pandemic, all hopes were lost for the XFL until Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and his company would buy the rights to the XFL and have future plans to continue it into a legitimate post-NFL season football league. The Wednesday Night Wars. The Wednesday Night Wars was a head-to-head war between WWE's NXT and AEW's Dynamite on the Wednesday night time slot. This war lasted from October 2nd, 2019 to April 7th, 2021, when NXT moved their show to Tuesday nights. AEW mostly dominated the war, as it was their show against WWE's Developmental League, where they would pull anywhere from 750,000 to over 1 million viewers to NXT's 550,000 to 800,000. I think a lot of people really had their heads up their ass with the concept of another war decades after the Monday Night Wars. Nothing really too interesting here to speak about, just the overpopulated topic of a so-called war that had no reason to be talked about as a war, per se. The Saudi Arabia show's poor quality. With the first WWE Saudi Arabia special being the Greatest Royal Rumble in April of 2018, there was some mixed reception from fans and critics alike. With the homophobic and sexist culture in Saudi Arabia, it was deemed not a good idea for the WWE to run shows there, but the WWE would run shows, and boy did they stink. With multiple terrible matches, such as the 50-man Royal Rumble, where the winner didn't even win a championship match for anything. He won a fake championship belt that was never defended on television again, and a very, very cheap-looking trophy, and a celebration in the ring with Triple H, Vince McMahon, and the Saudi Arabian Prince. Another terrible match was when Shane McMahon defeated Dolph Ziggler in the WWE World Cup to become the best wrestler in the world, in a tournament that also featured Kurt Angle, Seth Rollins, and originally was supposed to feature John Cena until he dropped out of the tournament due to not wanting to wrestle at Saudi Arabia. Another horrible match at the Saudi Arabia shows was a tag team match that would have been great 20 years ago between D-Generation X's Shawn Michaels and Triple H against Kane and Undertaker, the Brothers of Destruction. That match would end up being terrible with botches and people messing up, and just it was very slow. There was injuries. Shawn Michaels didn't look great. He came out of retirement for this match, and a payday did not look good. fans still despise this match, and I agree. It is very bad. At the Super Showdown 2018, with maybe the worst match of each man's career, The Undertaker and Goldberg would face off against each other at Saudi Arabia, with each man almost breaking each other's necks, with Goldberg coming into the match with a possible concussion after banging his head on the door making his entrance. Goldberg would almost break The Undertaker's neck performing the jackhammer, and The Undertaker would almost break Goldberg's neck performing the Tombstone Piledriver. Both men were old, tired, and should not have been in the ring that night. And last but not least, another terrible match featured Goldberg squashing The Fiend in 2020 to take the Universal Championship in a match that made absolutely no sense to build up to WrestleMania season, where there wasn't even a crowd at Mania. This was one of their last full crowd shows before the COVID-19 pandemic, therefore almost destroying the Fiend character himself, just squashing the Fiend in just a couple of minutes. I remember watching it live and was just so disappointed. I was pissed. I was really pissed. There have been so many terrible matches that take place at these terrible shows in Saudi Arabia. With so many more terrible matches I could talk about, I could make an entire video on this topic. So if you're interested in a Saudi Arabia terrible matches video, please let me know, and I'd love to make a whole video just talking about these terrible shows and poor match quality. The Hulk Hogan sex tape. In a huge scandal, a sex tape between Terry Bollea, known to fans professionally as Hulk Hogan, and Heather Clem, the at-the-time wife of radio personality Bubba the Love Sponge. Bollea claimed invasion of privacy and infringement of personality rights, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. This would end in a lawsuit being filed in 2013 with an ending verdict in 2016. Bollea v. Gawker was then started as Gawker released the film of Hogan. Bollea sought out $100 million in damages. In March 2016, the jury would find Gawker Media liable and awarded $115 million in compensatory damages. In 2016, it was reported that Bollea had sued Gawker again, saying that they were responsible for leaking sealed court documents that quoted Bollea using racial slurs. The WWE would then catch wind of this information and would release Bollea from his contract with the company and taking away his spot from the Hall of Fame. Although Hogan would apologize, he is still heavily scoffed at and booed and hated by wrestling fans alike. WWE would then rehire Bollea in 2018, and Hulk Hogan would return to a not-so-delighted audience. To every appearance that he makes now, people obviously really don't care anymore. WWE Superstar early jobber debuts. Before WWE stars you know and love today, some would debut under different names in a tryout match that they'd wrestle against a usual top star and lose in what's called a squash match. Some of the more famous examples are when AEW star Jon Moxley, formerly known as Dean Ambrose, had a short match on Sunday Night Heat against Val Venus in January of 2007. Ambrose then had what was called a strawberry pink hair and looked pretty goofy if you ask me. Speaking of goofy, another great example is James Ellsworth, the so-called no-chin wonder, would debut against Braun Strowman in July of 2016 on Monday Night Raw in an obvious losing effort. You know what they say, any man with two hands has a fighting chance. I did not mean to hit the mic right there. After multiple memes online showcasing Ellsworth, WWE would jump on the opportunity to hire Ellsworth to a contract, even to the point where they featured him in the world title scene on SmackDown with Dean Ambrose and AJ Styles. Other great examples are with John Cena and Bryan Danielson would wrestle each other on WWE Velocity, and even AJ Styles would face the Hurricane on WWE Jacked in January of 2002. You never know what jobber could be your next main eventer. Maybe he or she could just be right around the corner. The steroid scandal. The WWE steroid scandal, also known as the United States versus McMahon, was a trial that the United States District for the Eastern District of the New York Criminal Court case brought against Vince McMahon in 1994. They had suspicion of Vince supplying illegal anabolic steroids to his professional wrestlers at the time. The jury would find McMahon not guilty on July 23, 1994. In 1991, Dr. George Zahorian, who was the company's ringside doctor, had been accused of giving anabolic steroids to the wrestlers in the company and would stand trial with McMahon. At the trial, he was found guilty and would serve 3 years in prison after his conviction. By 2010, he had resumed practicing medicine in Pennsylvania. After the trial, the WWF would allegedly step up their drug testing for their wrestlers, although there was rumors that some of their biggest wrestlers would not be punished for failing drug tests involving anabolic steroids. I'm not going to name any names, but I think you can think of a couple. 11 wrestlers were called to testify. No wrestler attested that McMahon had supplied them with steroids other than Nails, who claimed that Vince had pressured him into taking steroids to make him look bigger. However, Vince McMahon's attorney argued that Nails was a hostile witness as he had been fired from the WWF years prior and was looking for revenge for McMahon. Kayfabe. Kayfabe is the portrayal of staged events within the industry of professional wrestling of reality. In a broader term, it is used as a suspension of disbelief that is used to create the non-wrestling aspects of promotions, feuds, angles, and gimmicks. To break kayfabe is to essentially break the fourth wall and seem real and be more built in reality. Kayfabe is usually broken during serious moments such as serious injuries, paying tribute to wrestlers either following death, retirement, or some huge achievement like a Hall of Fame speech. Or even interviews, where some wrestlers would do shoot interviews to talk about actual things that were happening and break kayfabe. Multiple people think kayfabe is dead, me alike, but I think what our kayfabe is a lot different from what we saw in other eras before us, such as the PG era, Ruthless Aggression, Attitude Era, New Generation, and the Golden Era. The Shockmaster. Shockmaster was a character often joked around the wrestling community as when the Shockmaster, played by former WWF star Tugboat, made his entrance in the A Flair for the Gold segment with Ric Flair on WCW TV for the Clash of Champions pay-per-view. Sting and Davey Boy Smith were confronted by Sid and Harlem Heat, demanding they know the identity of their new partner. Sting would exclaim, "All I have to say is our next partner is going to shock the world because he is none other than the Shockmaster." The camera would then point to the wall, and falling over as pyrotechnics would go off, he would fall through the wall and lose his stormtrooper-esque helmet, painted purple and covered in glitter. As he stands back up and puts the helmet back on, he tries to cut a promo that Sid tried so hard to save, but that segment was dead and unsavable. Fun fact, you can actually hear in the segment, it is not the real Shockmaster, and it was actually Ollie Anderson who is offset speaking the lines in a garbled mess. You can audibly hear the crew and even Ollie laughing and joking about how he fell. You can even hear somebody audibly say he fell on his effing arse after the fall. Such a comedic botch and moment and a for sure all-timer. Dave Meltzer. Dave Meltzer is a journalist and sports historian who reports on professional wrestling and mixed martial arts. He is widely regarded amongst most in professional wrestling, although he is not liked also by a lot in the business, with many fans and wrestlers thinking negatively about him of his Wrestling Observer newsletter. Even the hate that he has grown over the multiple decades that he has been a journalist, he is praised for his popularization of the star rating system, which rates matches on a scale of 0 to 5 stars, with even some matches going into the negative stars that are very bad, or going above the 5-star limit in matches that are very good. There is even a match with 7 stars where Kazuchika Okada and Kenny Omega had their match at Dominion 6.9 in June of 2018. ECW One Night Stand. ECW One Night Stand was originally a one-off ECW reunion show of June of 2005 at the Hammerstein Ballroom in New York City. In 2001, ECW was closed down due to financial issues, and the WWE would buy the assets in 2003. Coming off the success of the Rise and Fall of ECW documentary DVD in 2004, WWE would announce that they would hold an ECW reunion show. The show included multiple former ECW personalities such as Joey Styles, Justin Credible, the Sandman, and Tommy Dreamer, the Dudley Boys, and more. It also featured then Raw and SmackDown stars as well to fill in a bit of the undercard. The show would go off without a hitch, and then they would have a second One Night Stand in 2006. Then it would carry on a part of the WWE ECW branded show pay-per-views in 2007 and 2008. It would then retire the show after the 2008 pay-per-view. WWE 2K20 glitches. WWE 2K20 was a 2K-produced WWE simulation game released in October of 2019. The game would receive overwhelmingly negative reviews, with critics noting a step down in quality compared to last year's game, WWE 2K19. The game would then gain notoriety for its many bugs and glitches. The game would crash at the slightest inconvenience and had multiple bugs and glitches with the graphics and anything made in the custom suite. In response to the negative reviews, 2K would then cancel the upcoming game WWE 2K21 and put the series on hiatus for 2 years. They would then release a much better and complete game, WWE 2K22, in March of 2022. Brock Lesnar in the UFC. After Brock Lesnar left the WWE in 2004 for the NFL, he would then fail to make the roster on the Minnesota Vikings. A couple years later, Lesnar would then try out MMA in the UFC. He would then sign a contract with the company in 2008 and quickly won the UFC Heavyweight Championship, but that was then sidelined with diverticulitis in 2008. He would then return in 2010 and defeated interim UFC heavyweight champion Shane Carwin to unify the championships and become the undisputed UFC heavyweight champion. After a couple of losses and more struggles with diverticulitis, he would retire from MMA in 2011. 5 years after his retirement from the MMA, Lesnar would return for one more fight at UFC 200 in 2016 to defeat Mark Hunt, but his victory was then overturned to a no contest after he tested positive for clomiphene, which was a banned drug on the UFC's anti-doping policy. He would then retire a second time in 2017. To me, I really think that Brock Lesnar was a really good MMA star and was a huge box office sensation for the UFC, and he did compete in some of the highest selling UFC shows in the company's history. CM Punk's release. After the 2014 Royal Rumble, where he was eliminated by Kane, CM Punk did not appear on the post-Rumble Raw or SmackDown tapings. The Wrestling Observer reported that prior to the Monday Night Raw, he walked out after telling Vince and Triple H that he was going home. Later, on a February 20th conference call, Vince McMahon would say Punk was taking a sabbatical. On the March 3rd episode of Raw in Punk's hometown, Punk's music would hit where the crowd would explode, for it to only be Paul Heyman to come out the entryway. Punk was then officially released in July of 2014, citing he was also working hurt, sick, and tired. He was also given the pink slip on his wedding day with AJ Mendez. He also wrestled with a staph infection on his back for 3 months, and the WWE doctor at the time did nothing about it. He would then retire and basically trash talk the company, rightfully so, and promise to never return to the business ever again. And we know how that went. WWECW. WWECW, aka WWECW, was a failed third brand of the WWE rivaling Raw and SmackDown. It would last from 2006 to 2010. It originally had big success and hype as it featured former ECW talent and young superstars as some sort of a growing plant for younger superstars. Around its later years, it would later be criticized for being too boring and featuring people that nobody really knew or cared about. WWE would then end the show in 2010 and retire and vacate all of the ECW championship titles. WWE ECW would then be replaced by the highly acclaimed later highly acclaimed WWE NXT, but was originally the game show The Invasion. The Invasion was a pro wrestling storyline in the WWF featuring the WWF, WCW, and ECW superstars. But WCW and ECW would join together to create The Alliance. They created a stable to rival the WWF and take over the company. Between April of 2001 and November of 2001, the story continued with the Invasion pay-per-view and the Survivor Series pay-per-view. The angle had been under heavy criticism by fans, with people calling it a fail or a flop. One media referenced it as one of the most poorly handled, ego-filled storylines in wrestling history. WWF did not use most of the big talent either from each brand in the buyouts of their contracts, mostly using mid-card talent to lower mid-card talent or even jobbers from each company. Vince would essentially bury the talent from both companies post-storyline and did not stand a chance to make it far due to Vince's ego and hatred for WCW. Mankind versus Undertaker Hell in a Cell. Mankind versus The Undertaker in Hell in a Cell at the King of the Ring pay-per-view in June of 1998 is widely regarded as the best Hell in a Cell match of all time. With all of the bumps that Mick Foley, in character as Mankind, would take, and the fact that Taker was also working hurt with an injured ankle, with major spots such as Mankind being thrown off the top of the cell through the announce table at ringside, and an unplanned accidental spot where The Undertaker would chokeslam Mankind on the top of the cell would open up and he'd basically roll into the ring. Well, when The Undertaker chokeslammed Mankind, the whole thing opened up at once, and he fell through the cell to the ring. The Undertaker would later say that he thought that Foley was dead and was praying for him to move as he stared down to him from the top of the cell. The Undertaker would then have a run-in with Terry Funk and chokeslammed him out of his shoes. The Undertaker would then win this match and settle it all as being an all-timer in the category of Hell in a Cell matches in the company's history. The Nexus. The Nexus was a heel wrestling faction of young NXT rookies looking to take over the WWE. Originally being led by NXT Season 1 winner Wade Barrett, the Nexus looked to take out then WWE Champion John Cena in their debut. With members Wade Barrett, Daniel Bryan, later fired just 4 days after his debut, Darren Young, Skip Sheffield, Michael Tarver, Justin Gabriel, Heath Slater, and David Otunga. After a few more run-ins with Cena, Cena would defeat Barrett at TLC 2010 to destroy the rest of the Nexus. Although with a new Nexus on the rise with a new leader in CM Punk, It didn't really do that much, and the backstory for Punk would be the backstory for Punk, as he would take the WWE Championship from Cena at Money in the Bank 2011. Stone Cold gets hit by a car. As Stone Cold Steve Austin was preparing for a triple threat match for the WWF Championship against Triple H and The Rock at the 1999 Survivor Series, Stone Cold was attacked by Triple H in a backstage interview and was led to the parking garage of the arena. A car would then speed up, hit a gate, break it open, and hit Austin and swerve away and drive off. As Austin's body laid on the ground, people coming over to him, including Vince McMahon, Stephanie McMahon, medical personnel with an ambulance parking next to him to take his body to the hospital. Vince McMahon accused Triple H of having to do something with this, but Triple H would deny it. This was obviously a scripted storyline, as the main reason Stone Cold would get hit by the car was he needed neck surgery from his neck injury against Owen Hart just 2 years earlier. After multiple flip-flop changes of who hit Stone Cold Steve Austin, with one even being Taz, it was eventually revealed that it was Rikishi who hit Austin with the car, turning him heel, claiming that he did it for The Rock. Later in the night, Austin was replaced by The Big Show in the triple threat match and would defeat The Rock and Triple H to win the WWF Championship. Brock Lesnar's Shooting Star Press. Back in Brock Lesnar's younger days at the WWE's developmental league Ohio Valley Wrestling, OVW, in the early 2000s, it was widely regarded that Lesnar could perform a shooting star press, which is a very dangerous move if done incorrectly. It was very rare to see anyone the size of Lesnar to be able to perform such a move. Multiple years later, when Brock Lesnar was facing off against Kurt Angle at WrestleMania 19, Lesnar wanted to create a WrestleMania moment and would break out the shooting star press again. With Kurt Angle on the opposite side of the ring, Lesnar would get on the top rope and attempt the shooting star press. He would accidentally under-rotate it and fall almost directly on his head, almost breaking his neck and giving him a massive concussion. It is a massive miracle that not only did he not die, let alone become paralyzed or have to retire from wrestling. John Cena hatred. Around the 2005 to 2006, WWE would turn the trash-talking rapper John Cena into a heroic, almost Superman-esque character, with the new theme song and the new bright outfits and a WWE championship around his waist. People started to get annoyed with Cena, eventually to the point where everyone was tired of the predictable John Cena win, starting the phrase "John Cena wins, LOL." After pandering to the younger audience, after the company turned to TV PG in 2008, starting the PG era with John Cena at the helm. With multiple world championship wins and burying of smaller superstars, mostly heels, people were tired of Cena and would boo him all the way up to the near of the end of his career, where he now gets cheered and the occasional boos for old time's sake. I'd say most of Cena's best work was from 2015 to 2019. Even though people would boo him, he was able to have some of the best matches of his career and put over so much young talent and have just so many great matches. I suggest you watch some of them. "I'm sorry, I love you." "I'm sorry, I love you" was the quote from Shawn Michaels to his opponent Ric Flair at WrestleMania 24 in Orlando, Florida. This was Ric Flair's retirement match, and Shawn Michaels was saying that he was sorry for having to do this and that he loved him. After saying that, he would hit Ric Flair with Sweet Chin Music and pin him 1, 2, 3 and defeat Ric Flair, and Flair would then retire. At least from the WWE, that is. December to Dismember. December to Dismember was a WWE ECW branded pay-per-view in December of 2006. It is widely regarded as one of the worst, if not the worst, WWE pay-per-view of all time, to the point where there were only a few announced matches ahead of time, with most of them being impromptu. With a terrible audience attendance and a terrible buy rate, it also featured superstars that nobody cared about. Featured Matt Striker, Balls Mahoney, Kevin Thorne, Mike Knox, Elijah Burke, The show only had 6 matches and 1 championship match, with an Extreme Rules Chamber match, or an Extreme Elimination Chamber match for the ECW World Championship, where Bobby Lashley would defeat The Big Show, Test, RVD, Hardcore Holly, and then fan favorite CM Punk. Fans were livid at the time. One of the original entrants in the match was supposed to be Sabu, but he was injured and replaced by Hardcore Holly. The show was so bad that Paul Heyman had an altercation with Vince McMahon backstage and then was fired after the show was over when Vince sent him home. Heyman was also removed from ECW Creative. Heyman wanted CM Punk to win the title in the match, but Vince wanted Lashley, therefore Lashley would win. Also, after the show, Tommy Dreamer and Stevie Richards, members of the ECW roster, both asked for their release from the company, but was denied and refused by management. Dark matches. A dark match is essentially an untelevised pre-show or post-show match intended to hype up the crowd or send the crowd home happy, or see how a younger superstar is in front of a large crowd. Usually before or after a Raw or SmackDown, these matches are filmed but not televised, and sometimes are used as tape for superstars to study. Parts unknown. Parts unknown is a wrestling term for we have no clue where this person is actually from. Popularized by Papa Shango and the Ultimate Warrior, wrestling fans alike have used it a part of the fandom and a real place that these wrestlers would come from. In fact, if you visit a deleted or broken link on the WWE website, it'll give you a Parts Unknown image with superstars from Parts Unknown. There is also a group of people in Britain who run a wrestling YouTube channel called Parts Funknown, which is a play on the term Parts Unknown. They talk professional wrestling, and I advise that you go check them out. And the last term on the first tier, mass releases. Mass releases are multiple releases, usually within 1, maybe 2 days. WWE would usually perform the spring cleaning tactic and release stars they have nothing for or just don't need anymore, or were paying too much money. The WWE carried this out almost every year during the spring up until COVID, where they stepped it up a lot. Under a lot of scrutiny, the WWE would still release multiple superstars during the COVID-19 pandemic in mass releases. In April of 2020, they fired 30 wrestlers in 1 day. And when they would do this several more times. This was also only under the helm of Vince McMahon, and we are now under the reign of Paul Triple H Levesque. Hopefully the WWE doesn't have to resort to releasing superstars from their contract, especially like they did during the pandemic in 2020. Thank you for watching the Tier 1 of the Definitive WWE Iceberg. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and stay tuned for Tier 2, where I'll be discussing the topics on Tier 2 sometime soon. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.